Nvidia just unveiled their next step in their DLSS journey with DLSS 5, infusing pixels with photorealistic lighting and materials. They showed off some demos to give gamers an outlook on what to expect with this tech in games in the future, which caused actually quite a bit of uproar in the PC gaming community. Along with that, we have one of Nvidia's biggest AIBs coming out and saying that Nvidia has been supplying 20% less gaming GPUs to the market, resulting in a 10 to 20% decline in the PC market. All of that and more to be discussed in this video.
Alright guys, so a bit of a weird setup. I was just out here running some errands, and this portion of the video that you're watching now is actually recorded after all the other segments. And the only reason why I'm doing this is because there were some updates. GTC is actually a conference or keynote that's held for a number of days. So there was some stuff that came out afterwards. Jensen himself actually came out and addressed all of the backlash, and he responded to it. And I think probably one of the worst ways he could have done so during a Q&A session. And basically he came out, I'll have the little statement posted on when I'm editing the video, but basically he came out and said that, nope, everyone's all wrong. Gamers are wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. You guys don't know what you guys want. This is the best technology that we ever made, which I think was one of the worst ways he could have handled the backlash, because everyone knows what they want. People are, he has to give the consumers a lot more credit, right? And we'll talk more about this later on in the video about, you know, how people have warmed up to all of the other various DLSS technologies. But instead, what he could have done was said something like, hey, you know, we understand that DLSS 5, this whole neural rendering technology, is still relatively new. It's new for us. This is our first revision, our first attempt at it. And we're gonna work on it. We're gonna listen to all of the feedback. We're gonna work with our developers. We're gonna work with other game engine creators, and we're really gonna work on optimizing it and refining it and making it so that way it doesn't conflict or take away from the original artist's intent, and actually still satisfies what gamers are looking for and doesn't feel like generic AI slop. Like we're gonna work with everyone. We're gonna listen to all the feedback, but instead he just comes out and says some dumb shit like, yeah, everyone's wrong. You guys don't know what you want. It sounds like every other typical, you know, billionaire CEO that's out there that's just, you know, out of touch with their actual consumers, kind of like what Randy did with Borderlands 4. Yeah, that's my take on it. Hopefully someone else comes out and addresses it better, because that was definitely not the right way to handle it. But I'll let you guys carry on with the rest of the video.
Hey, what is going on, guys? Danny here. Welcome back to the channel, and I hope you're all doing well. We've got a great couple of topics to talk about in this one. Nvidia actually just unveiled DLSS 5, and I did post a short on the channel yesterday giving my quick initial thoughts on it, but I did want to talk about it more in this long form video. But before we dive into all of that, I did want to actually talk about this report posted by Video Cards, who are citing a website called MoneyUDN, who are a Taiwanese financial reporting site, and they had a chance to talk with an executive from MSI, who, as you guys probably know, are one of Nvidia's biggest partners, AIB partner that is. But they mentioned some concerning stuff that will be affecting their future product supply, along with considerable changes to pricing. Due to the shortage in memory and SSDs because of the AI demand, along with increasing pricing, they stated that this has been the toughest year for them that they've had to face. And I mean, that can be said for a lot of companies, I think, in the semiconductor industry. Along with that, they were quoted as saying that Nvidia's GPU supply is also insufficient, with the shortfall estimated at 20%. As a result, he estimated that the PC market will actually decline by 10 to 20%, which is more severe than the initial 10% decline that was forecasted by research firms. They also stated that MSI is expected to increase the price of their gaming-focused products. It said esports in the article, but that's really just a mistranslation. But an increase of around 15 to 30% is expected on stuff like GPUs, motherboards, all-in-one systems like laptops, handhelds, and pre-built systems. Furthermore, when it comes to GPUs specifically, they said that they're going to be focusing on more mid-range and higher-end stuff, but what's weird in the article is they mentioned RTX 5060, which I thought was kind of weird because the 5060 is an entry-level card, and I know there's the 5050, but that's more of like an ultra-low-end card, and even the 5070, if you take a look at its specs and everything, the die size, it's more of a lower mid-range card, if anything, but by a higher end, they probably mean focusing on stuff like the 5090. You guys probably saw they were doing, since CES, a whole bunch of marketing surrounding their Lightning 5090, which is like $7,000 or something like that. It's absolutely insane. 5080s, that'll probably make sense for them as well. Other higher margin products, even if the volume overall supplied and sold is less, it should still help with their financial targets that they're looking to appease. But that will only work if consumers are obviously willing to accept those higher margins. I mean, considering other manufacturers are also doing the same and someone finds themselves in that situation, they may not actually even have a choice. But like we've discussed in our previous videos, people are not going out and, purchasing 32 gigabytes of RAM at $500 and are choosing to ride out their current systems for as long as possible. The other thing here too is that it's not sounding like this is some short-term inventory hiccup or anything like that, where in a month or two, everything magically goes back to normal. Nvidia themselves have already said that, the supply is expected to remain very tight for the next few quarters, this whole year, even next year. And Reuters is also reporting that in terms of gaming chips, this can last for another couple of years. So when you combine that with MSI saying that supply is roughly 20% under what the market actually needs, plus all the memory coat pressure that we've been talking about, it paints a pretty ugly picture for the rest of the year. Lower supply, higher component costs, and manufacturers trying to protect their margins and doing whatever usually does not end well or give better value for the PC gamer. It ends with worse availability, higher street pricing, and less reason for the companies to give aggressive discounts on their products. And I think the bigger concern here is, what this does to the shape of the market going forward. Because when costs like this are going to continue to rise and companies just stop caring about, the general consumer or fighting for the budget buyer and start leaning harder into premium products where they can still make decent money, that lines up with MSI talking about, their focus on mid-range and higher end products. And honestly, that's where I think things are going to get really dangerous for the health of the PC gaming hobby. If entry level and, value focused hardware still gets squeezed like this or ends up even erased altogether, then more people are just going to delay their upgrades or just, indefinitely delay it, settle for used hardware, and then skip the market altogether. Gartner is, already projecting worldwide PC shipments to fall about 10%, which is under that estimation that the MSI executive was talking about, while combined DRAM and SSD prices could surge up, another 130% by the end of the year, raising PC price components by, 17%. That is not the kind of backdrop that, leads to a healthy consumer market in any case. And I mean, speaking of alternatives, we recently heard the news about the Xbox Helix, which is supposed to be like basically a full-on gaming PC. And you know how it is with console manufacturers, they'll try to do some subsidizing with the costs. And I think in the future, if, building a full-on tower may be unattainable, some people may look at that as the next best alternative, where, hey, if it's, like a pre-built box and I can still install Steam on it and play my Steam library, then I might just go that route. Could certainly be a viable option. But to me, MSI with this report, it really just gives more confirmation on the trend that we've been seeing, right? AI demand is totally disrupting the supply chain. Memory is hammering the broader PC space, and gaming hardware is increasingly becoming, part of the industry that gets the scraps. Where the focus is on the higher margin stuff that needs to be taken care of, and then the budget low end stuff is just completely gone and obliterated. And that's exactly what's gotten PC gamers to be so, jaded and frustrated in the market ever since this year started. But moving on, let's talk about our next topic. And I wanted to talk about Nvidia's DLSS 5. So Nvidia actually held their annual GTC keynote on March 16th. And, going into this entire keynote, I was honestly expecting it to be completely dedicated towards AI and data center. I didn't actually think they were going to talk about anything to do with gaming or GeForce for that matter, but surprisingly, their GeForce Twitter account was talking about, join us as we're going to be talking about the next evolution in gaming graphics and rendering technologies. So when they unveiled DLSS 5, which is going to be using a newer neural network, where they're going to be infusing photorealistic lighting and materials with pixels, that's supposed to be bringing a massive uplift to the image. But the community's reception to this technology has obviously been very interesting. I'm sure you guys have seen it. There's been a lot of division, but the majority are calling it AI slop and garbage. And it's not the future that we should be hoping for. And I can certainly see arguments from both sides, right? Now, if you go onto NVIDIA's website where they posted their article about DLSS 5, they also actually included some interactive comparisons you can check out for yourself from popular single player titles like Resident Evil Requiem, Starfield, and Hogwarts Legacy. And I mean, just taking a look at some of these examples, I can see why there was, so much division or, so much backlash from the community. Because, if you take a look at this first example here, right? And I was told that the character model that they used was actually on like low settings. or the character texture model option was set to low, which if they did do that, that's extremely disingenuous of Nvidia. But take a look at this image. I think it looks fine, right? But then you bring in DLSS 5 and it feels like it completely changes the whole entire tone of the image. Now, I'm not going to say it's completely all bad. I think there are some aspects of it that look fine or can look even better. But the character model is obviously a drastic change and looks very generic. And I mean, there were some pretty harsh comments people were making. I'm not going to mention that over here, but you guys can let me know. But I think it is certainly a pretty drastic change. And I mean, in this example here, the stock image looks totally fine. And I mean, bringing DLSS 5, it does drastically change the character model and makes it look pretty generic. And really gives it that sort of AI identity that a lot of people just absolutely despise, right? Another example was with Leon. And this right here is a pretty good example of where the stock image is totally fine. And I think that's also one of the reasons why people were getting kind of irritated about DLSS 5, because a lot of these examples they were showing, the original image looked fine. So it goes back to the whole thing about why are you trying to fix something that isn't necessarily broken. But I mean, this one here, um, yeah, I would say that the DLSS off version looks better. DLSS 5 seems to like overly brighten some of the portions of his skin too much. Um, and it really changes up the tone of the whole entire image. But I think, there's some examples that can work. I think sports game, I might be kind of in the minority for this, or might be a hot take from me, but I think for sports games, it can certainly work pretty well because like for sports games, you want that, ultra realistic environment, right? To really feel like you're immersed in the game that's actually ongoing. So I think for sports games, it can certainly work out well. I think these are pretty decent examples. Um, Starfield, I know people were complaining about this one, and some people were like, and the reason why there was so much division on this one, because when you take a look at like the stock models, and I'm sure you guys have seen some of the other videos, the Starfield character models can look pretty janky. It has that, that Bethesda signature Bethesda touch on it, which some people think is the charm of Bethesda games, right? I certainly I didn't have a problem with the original models. Some of them looked pretty janky or kind of funny, but that added to the game for me as well. But then you look at this and it's like, okay, this feels completely different. It's like me copying and pasting this image and then pasting this into ChatGPT and being like, hey, can you just turn this photorealistic? And then it just spits this out, which I mean, some people might prefer, right? Like it's totally subjective, I think. But yeah, like the other thing too is you take a look at something like this, and I think there's some aspects of it, like the background environment, the flooring, that can actually turn out to be better looking, or polish up the image. And that's the other thing people are talking about, right? Like this looks like an overall filter. Will we have some options to adjust it? How are devs going to be implementing this? So we'll talk about that more in just a moment. This was another example, people were talking about. Feels like a totally different image, just copying and pasting into ChatGPT and being like, can you turn this into a photorealistic image? Which I don't think, some people actually appreciate. This was another example here. I look at the background and I'm like, there's some changes ongoing in the background that I think could be for the better. But yeah, the character model definitely loses its original intent over there for sure. Hogwarts Legacy as well could be another one that you look at. But you guys can let me know. I think this is something that everyone's just gonna have to test for themselves moving forward. This here was actually another example I wanted to talk about. This is actually from Nvidia's own in-house demo. But I mean, if we were to assume this was a game, right, and this was the original image, I think it looks totally fine. I don't have any problems with it. But then when you bring on the DLSS 5, mode, it does I wouldn't say drastically, but it does definitely change up the lighting quite a bit. Where now it actually has like that more sort of grayish, white tone, realistic feel to it, which the original image has more of like a yellowish sepia tone to it, which again, like if that's the artist's original intent, that's the environment they're trying to set on, and then DLSS 5 comes in and it changes it so drastically like this, right? I can see why people would have a problem with that, and then why they can say it can ruin their experience. So, like, when it comes to DLSS 5, I don't want to be completely dismissive about it. I think there are certain applications or, areas where it could work well when developers implement it. But I think they need to give the user thorough control on what areas it'll affect the screen, what objects it can affect. What if I just wanted to affect the flooring and the walls, rather than, them applying the entire screen filter and it feeling like, a Snapchat filter rather than a actual technology that you can target for certain aspects of the game, whether that be characters, character models, clothing, weapons, what have you, right? And the implementation from the developers is certainly going to be the biggest thing because when we've seen devs in the past get lazy, instead of optimizing their games correctly, and instead they flat out just tell people, use upscaling and frame generation to attain a playable frame rate. You guys remember that whole fiasco with Borderlands 4 and how moronic Randy was acting on Twitter, telling people just turn on DLSS, turn on frame generation in X3 mode, upgrade your PC, guys. So I don't want to see in the development cycle where a game has that whole actual artistic human touch completely omitted from it, and they let this AI or DLSS 5 instead take care of all of that, because then what's going to happen is that, yes, there will be a lot of games coming out which will be doing just that, and then everything is going to look like AI slop, homogenous garbage. Nothing will feel different. Nothing will have any true character in it. And then people are just going to end up getting burnt out. So I think this is one of the main fears people have of this technology of DLSS 5 going mainstream, and then a lot of developers hopping on board with it because they fear that there's going to be no human touch to that developmental cycle in terms of the artistic vision. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about was the whole performance aspect, and this is all pretty preliminary. Apparently, the demo that Nvidia was running was on two RTX 5090, so that's a heck of a lot of GPU power that's needed. Right now, that would cost you like $10,000 plus, depending on the pricing of your region. But they did say that they will further optimize the model to just work on a single GPU, but not too many details were given beyond that. It's all pretty vague. And in fact, Nvidia never really shared any sort of performance numbers or targets with it. How they always show those demos where they turn on DLSS upscaling and frame generation, and they show how much better the performance is compared to when you were running native, right? Which tells me that this is going to be certainly super demanding, and that they are going to tell the user that, yeah, in order to fully experience it smoothly, you're going to need DLSS upscaling, you're going to need frame generation in X4 mode, which may be one of the big reasons why this is exclusive to the 50 series for now. So imagine that you have your game's image upscaled through AI, you've got your fake AI frames, and then now you've got your AI infusion of photorealistic lighting and materials. And then this feature could be one of the big selling points NVIDIA uses for the RTX 6000 series, where they show just how much the 50 series struggles with it. And then with the 6000 series, they're showing like a 70 class card beating the 5090 with the DLSS 5 mode turned on. So, that could be one of the big selling points for that, and then maybe by then they'll have like a DLSS 5.5 revision of it where it'll be better and it'll feel like it has that human touch to it where it's not totally distorting the image. And then by then people will have warmed up to it like we've seen, with technology in the past. But because, like I said earlier, I don't want to be completely dismissive about this. We don't know how exactly this will turn out. Could be like DLSS 1, right? DLSS 1 was widely regarded as total garbage and not usable. DLSS 2.0 came out and people were like, okay, it's starting to get better. Maybe I can use it. And then DLSS 3.0 came out and people were all like, okay, I'm all for it. I actually turn on DLSS upscaling by default, and that's the way I choose to go rather than playing native. And then the same thing ended up happening with frame generation, right? Before everyone was making fun of it. It's fake frames. I'm not turning it on. The input lag is horrible, and then NVIDIA revised it, and then other vendors started hopping on it, right? Intel, AMD, they came out with their own implementations, and then all of a sudden people warmed up to it, and now some people choose to use frame generation as a default. And I mean, it's not all bad, right? Like I've explained in the past, these technologies, they can certainly breathe some life into older or lower end hardware. I like utilizing them on my handheld. Certainly brings the device's capabilities or uplifts the device's capabilities to be able to handle some AAA gaming. So who knows how that all of that's going to turn out, right? And maybe that the same thing is going to happen with DLSS 5, where they might finally do some revision and it's going to be doing some actual sensible uplifting rather than some of the egregious transformation we've seen right here. But for me personally, like I said, I'm just gonna have to test this stuff out for myself before I make any sort of definitive conclusions about it. And the biggest thing for me will be performance. I'd rather just see devs, of course, natively optimize their games and make it pretty natively. But I'm still open-minded about utilizing these technologies to enhance my experience. But that's gonna wrap it up for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll touch base in the next video. Take care.
If you guys found this video to be informative and entertaining, then leave a like. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Be sure to check out the video description for cool links and ways to support the channel, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. And if you're interested in seeing more content like this, then consider subscribing, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.